Build Your Business listeners. This is Matt Reynolds, your host for the podcast, and you are listening to what we are calling the legacy episodes. And really, these are the pre-episodes that really led to this podcast, the Build Your Business podcast. This is really my life's work and my brother's life's work in building your business. And so they were originally published in the Barbell Logic podcast as part of the Principles or Coaching Success series, but really touch on similar topics to the Build Your Business podcast: how to improve your productivity, how to set and accomplish your goals, deprioritize urgent tasks, to focus on what is most important to you, and most importantly, to become a better person and leader and business owner overall. I'm proud to bring you these podcasts. Again, many years of life's work, several years of podcasts, and several decades of business ownership. Hope you enjoy them and learn from them. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. This is another Principles edition, and good Sunday morning to you. I'm here with my brother Chris, and we want to talk a little bit today. You know, we are a habits-based service. We spend a lot of time talking about how to develop good habits, but we haven't really ever broached the subject about how to break bad ones. And so we're going to give you our thoughts on how to break bad habits today. So I'll let Chris start this thing up.
Yeah, so I recently finished a book, sort of classic, Chris. I'm going to give you two book recommendations that I just thought were fantastic. One I read a while ago. It's called The Power of Habit.
Yep.
It's a fantastic book.
But by the way, it was a super famous book. I mean, the guy, it was a New York Times bestseller a few years ago. Yep. It's very common.
And so is this one. I think this one's a pretty famous book. It's at least extremely popular amongst investors right now, and it's called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke.
Okay.
I don't know if you know who she is, but Annie Duke is a World Series of Poker champion.
Yep.
So, but anyway, what got me thinking about this as I was reading this book about bad habits was I'm like really, really good at following my nutrition guidelines. Like really good, like unnaturally good.
Sure.
I just normally have the ability to eat whatever I say I'm going to eat, and that's all I eat.
Yeah, you're one of those guys that's kind of like a robot with stuff like that.
Like it's pretty, yeah, I can pretty much just do it.
Do you think you enjoy food a little bit less than some of us?
Certainly.
Like for some of us who are kind of what they call super tasters or whatever, like
Right.
You don't think that's what you've got. You're just like, yeah, it's fine. It's good. But you don't ever take a bite of food and like, holy shit, like this is a life-changing experience. That never
Certainly
happens.
not life-changing. I mean, I can definitely tell the difference between great food, great wine, great whiskey, whatever, and really crappy.
Right.
But like all the shades in between, I'm pretty much not
Got
there. The one caveat, however, to my fantastic ability to pretty much eat what I'm supposed to eat is nighttime. Right? Nighttime. Whew. All day long, I can follow the prescription to the T. I mean, perfect. I don't miss a single macronutrient by the gram. I mean, I measure everything that goes in my mouth, and I nail it.
Right.
Then the kids go to bed, and my wife and I sit down and watch a TV show or something, or just hang out, and the cravings just come piling on. It's like whatever I did at that point in time, up to that point, my body's going like, oh, you need like all the sweet food or fatty food or salty food or whatever. And so I had just finished reading this book, Thinking in Bets, and she was talking about how, people say stuff all the time that they don't actually, they don't know. Like they don't actually know a thing, but they'll state it as a fact. And if you're hanging out with people who are like poker players, they'll typically say like, want to bet?
That's right.
And the second you have to put money on it, you go like, oh shit, wait a second. How do I know that? Where did I get it from?
Yep.
Like it causes this effect. Well, flash back several years ago when I was reading a little bit about behavioral economics, and this whole theory around, if you want to just if you want to do something that you're having a hard time doing, or you want to break a habit that you have a hard time breaking, in my case, night eating, I would like to not put a single thing in my mouth after my kids go to bed at night. Like, that's it. And so what you can do is, for some people, if you're highly motivated by money, you could put money on it. And you could basically, you need somebody to hold you to it. So in this case, it'd be my wife who's hanging out with me. So if I'm not, you can't really do it yourself, or you'll let yourself off the hook. So that doesn't work. But what money is also not particularly motivating to me. Never has been. Like, I can accumulate it quickly, but that's part of the game. That's math and whatnot. Sure. Like, I don't care about that. But there are things that matter a lot to me. And there's another thing here that matters, and I think adds a little bit of weight to this, which is we hate losing more than we love winning. In fact, we hate losing 2 times more than we love winning.
This is a stat from the book for humanity in general?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's been measured many times over.
Okay.
And we can prove it many ways over, which we may talk about at some point. But we hate losing.
Yes.
And while we like winning, once you've won, it doesn't really stick with you. But once you've lost, days might go by. Depends, on the kind of thing you've lost. And so for me, I like the idea of, if I put something in my mouth, I want something terrible to happen. Rather than win something, I just want I want the worst thing that I can think of. And so you almost have to, gather things and write them in your notebook. If you, I have a notebook I sort of carry around about things that would just be terrible, like great ways you could leverage that stuff.
For me, self-induced punishment.
Self-induced punishment.
Right.
For me, there's a particularly easy one, and we're not going to go off on a political track right now, but if I had to make a donation to a certain organization that, let's say, I absolutely loathed, like to my core.
Right.
And I had to look up, so for me, it would be like, if you do a political donation, if it's under $50, it's anonymous. You can do it anonymously. You can't have my name stuck with these types of things. But if I had to do it, the $50 does not matter to me at all.
It's the donation.
But who I'm giving it to matters a lot in my head, right? And so I told my wife, I was like, listen, if I put anything in my mouth at all, except for water, after the kids go to bed, I'm going to pre-write the check. I'm putting it in an envelope, and you're in control of it. You have to mail it. Okay? And she's like, all right. She's on board, 100%. And I have not put a thing in my mouth after the kids go to bed.
For how long?
So far it's been about a week.
Okay.
So
we got to get another 3-4 weeks in to know it works long term.
Yeah, we have to see how far it goes, right? I've done this before, and typically it's just a matter of keeping it at the forefront of your mind and weighting it as heavily as you can.
Sure.
But it's a neat little trick, and for everybody, it's different, right? Like, some people are just totally apolitical, or money's a good enough thing, or maybe they want to win something. So if they do something for some consecutive period of time, they're going to be able to, go on a special trip or buy something that they want or something. Sure. But whatever it is that you do, when it comes to breaking bad habits, I find that whoever your life partner is, that person is probably a good person to hold you to it.
Right.
Or buddy or whatever. But one way or the other, you need somebody to hold you to it.
There.
That's where the accountability comes in. And then it really works better, about 2 times better, in fact, for it to be something that is miserable if you fail.
You don't want to lose. So it's not,
something you don't want to lose.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think one of the things that's important to recognize is that for you don't really see, you're a pretty binary person the way you think, right? Like, there's not a lot of, and what I mean by that is you can actually think about food often in terms of like good and bad. And I think that's a slippery slope for food in general. It works for you because you're like a bunch of the rest of us that you're just a little bit on the autistic scale. And so that the zeros and ones work pretty well for a guy like you. There are definitely bad habits that I have seen my friends and family break. and that I have broken that I think everyone would assign some level of morality or unhealthiness to it. So for example, like a buddy that gave up smoking, like he was a lifelong chain smoker. The guy was going to die from COPD if he kept smoking.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, this isn't about like, hey, I need to punish myself if I go eat ice cream. For you're right now, we're heading into summer. You're about to go on vacation. Your training is really good. You're as strong as you've been since your powerlifter days 15 years ago. And so I think for you, it became one of those deals where it was like, you use it to help you reach the goals you're trying to reach right now, which is to both look really good and perform really well and be really healthy and feel great, right? And so, and so if you take something like smoking, for me, this may surprise our listeners, I have dramatically cut back on the amount of alcohol that I've been drinking. Yep. Now, let me be clear. I never or very, very, very rarely will drink to the point that I would be drunk or someone would consider me, or even drunk enough to where like I would test as drunk for like a blood alcohol test for driving, right? I just don't let myself get there. For me, the alcohol there are two parts to the alcohol bad habit in my life. One is that I think that a lot of people, I actually think that probably most people use alcohol this way, but they don't say it this way. And when I'm going to say it this way, it's going to sound like a bigger problem than it is, right? I will often self-medicate with alcohol because I'm so stressed and I just want to chill a little bit. Now, when I say that, I don't mean like, hey, I want to escape my problems and let me have 8 drinks of alcohol. I'm like, hey, I'll have a glass. Now, what most people do is they're like, I just do that at 5 o'clock at night, to take the edge off. Hey, that's the same thing, kids. Taking the edge off at 5 o'clock at night, or like ending your workday by going to happy hour for a drink before you go home, that's the same thing. Let's call it what it is, which is we are self-medicating to the point that we are trying to get out of high stress neurotic work mode and get into relaxed mode. And whether that's, and that doesn't mean that you drink to the point of drunkenness or silliness or where you can't be a good husband or dad. And we're not talking about that. We're not frat boys that are drinking until we throw up and get alcohol poisoning. That's stupid, right? As a matter of fact, I bet it's been 20 years since I had enough alcohol to make me sick. But it's not a great habit to be in, to be like, hey, like I don't have prescription medication for anxiety or anything like that. And so I don't have something like that, which I also think is, for some people, is completely necessary. And for some people, it can also be a crutch. And so for me, if I'm not careful, alcohol could be a crutch that way. And if that's the case, it is not healthy. 2, the amount of alcohol that I could drink or would drink over the course of the day as early as I get up. Like I might have my first drink at 11 in the morning. Like I'm more of a day drinker. Like I just, have a glass every few hours. There are lots of days I would look back and be like, wow, I had 5 or 6 drinks today, one every 2 to 2.5 hours. So the one that I drank before had completely digested and processed and pretty much out of my system before the next one came in. So they weren't compounding the alcohol effects. They were compounding the caloric effects. And then you blink and you're like, oh, I had 1,500 calories in alcohol today. It makes you fat and unhealthy. And so for me, now here's the interesting thing for me. My bad habits almost always must be replaced with good habits. So for me, and what I hear you describe, I will almost always start my process of breaking bad habits in the same way that you did it. It is a form of white-knuckle discipline, a combination of both punishment and reward. But what I have found in my life and in the lives of most of my clients is that is long-term unsustainable if it doesn't turn into a habit within about 2 to 3 weeks. Now, 2 to 3 weeks in, if you're just like, man, I've taught my body. So here's another great example. If you've ever done intermittent fasting and you haven't eaten anything in the mornings, right? So you're basically intermittent fasting. You're just doing it at nighttime right now. You eat.
I did intermittent fasting for years.
That's right. But
like long fasting.
For anybody that knows, the first 2 weeks that you do that, 9:30 in the morning, your stomach is making noises. It is growling like crazy, right? Yep. And you're like, I just want to eat. But what's weird is that once your body gets used to it, and you don't eat till noon or whatever, then all of a sudden you don't even get hungry in the mornings, right? And so my guess is that your your goal in breaking this bad habit and again, it's not that food is bad or that eating after 7 p.m. is bad, is that for you would often get 50% of your calories in the day in post 7 p.m. snacking, which then had a trickle down effect onto health and performance and aesthetics and all those things that you're trying to improve.
The whole, I mean, essentially, yes, that's the idea. There's a whole set of things there, but essentially, if you're going to try and get, your body in summer shape, which I'm ashamed to say those words, by the way.
I get it.
But it is what it is, right? I'm just going to admit it. I'm going to admit it right now. I'm just vain enough to care.
Is there anybody actually, if you were honest, that's listening to the show that really literally doesn't care if you were going to a beach vacation, if you're going to go to on a vacation with your family to a resort, to a beach where you're going to be half naked? Do you really not care at all how you look? Come on. Everybody actually cares about how they look, right? So I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I certainly do.
I certainly do as well.
And it's that game is a game of precision when it comes to calories. So it doesn't even have to be, 50% of the calories. It can be going over by enough on a regular basis. Really what it is it's like a compounding effect, because if every night you've trained yourself that, okay, kids are in bed, we get to watch a show, and your body just immediately goes into that mode of like, ooh, I need something salty and delicious to eat, right? Then, that night, probably not that big a deal, but every night for a matter of weeks starts becoming a big deal. And so that's definitely a big part of it. Also, part of what led me to really clean up my nutrition over the course of the last, call it, 4 or 5 weeks, I guess it's been longer than that we've been working on it, several months, is the training as well. So this is part of Power of Habit. They talk about these virtuous cycles of habit. So, I mean, I've been training a lot, and I've been getting substantially stronger, definitely as strong as I've been throughout my entire 30s at this point. Like, I've not been this strong since I was a powerlifter. And I thought, sweet, like, what's next? How do I improve on this, right? And so it was kind of a nutrition deal for me as well.
Look good and have good, which I think is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I also like that your punishment, your quote unquote punishment for you, is completely unrelated to eating after 7, which I also think is really important. I think a really unhealthy cycle to get in is if you're like, well, if I eat after 7, then I have to do an hour of cardio at 9 p.m. to burn off those calories. That's a terrible idea. That's how you end up with eating disorders, right? Like that's a bad relationship.
It's terrible for sleep.
It's just a bad relationship with food in general, right? So we don't punish ourselves in the same realm. What you're doing is you're setting up a system. This is what I think is going on. I think you're setting up a system of reward and punishment for yourself that's essentially discipline over motivation in the short term until motivation outpaces the discipline, and eventually you're motivated to actually do the thing and actually have the bad habit broken, right? Yeah. And that's kind of what happened to me with alcohol. I got to the point where I was like, there's really nothing good that comes from this outside of 1 or 2 drinks a day with my wife, again, I don't need to really almost ever have a drink by myself. Like, there's no reason to sit at my desk and have a drink. Like, that's not, So if I want to enjoy a glass of champagne with my wife, like there's value in that. I get value out of that.
Yeah.
But if I look back over the day and I go, I've had 6 drinks today. Every 2.5 hours, I had a drink. Never even felt the alcohol. But let me tell you what, I feel the calories, right? Especially if you do that day in and day out. And so I created a system of discipline. Like, okay, I have to be disciplined to break this habit. And then eventually you're motivated enough to where it becomes a habit. Like, remember when we first broke the very first bad habit we ever broke? You know where I'm going with this? Soda.
Not at the moment. Oh yeah.
We were massive soda junkies, man. And you figured it out early on that with soda, you're actually addicted to 2 things, not 1 thing.
That's right.
You're addicted to caffeine and you're addicted to sugar. And so
I got to give props to my psychology professor for that one. I walked in daily with a, whatever they were, 20-ounce bottle of Mountain Dew in college. And at one point, I think I told him, I was like, man, I got to break this habit. This is no good. I'm drinking one basically in every class.
Right.
I mean, it was terrible. And he goes, well, you should know this. Probably need to kick the sugar before you kick the caffeine.
That's right.
because what you're really addicted to is the sugar. That's the worst one.
Yeah. So what you did is you went and got caffeine pills, caffeine supplements, and supplemented with caffeine so you didn't get the withdrawal caffeine headaches, and you kicked the sugar, and then you kicked the caffeine. It made it much
Classic
more
Chris,
easy.
by the way. Like zero concern. I've talked to people about this before, and they look at me just like I'm crazy. They're like, you went and purchased caffeine pills, which sets off all sorts of alarms for most people, but has zero effect on me whatsoever. Right. And they're like, caffeine pills so that you could stop drinking soda? That's terrible. You traded one thing for the other.
Worked.
No, I didn't.
In fact, it worked.
I found the two different molecules that were causing me to
and in fact, now I'm on neither.
Addicted.
Now I don't take caffeine
now I'm
pills.
on neither.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Well, I mean, think about it. Smokers do this. This is the common way you kick smoking. You're addicted to the habit of smoking, of taking the smoke break, of going outside. It's like water cooler time. You go out with your buddy or your friends and you talk about the boss and you smoke a cigarette, and you're addicted to the process of the smoke.
Yeah.
And so they supplement with nicotine patches, nicotine gum, nicotine whatever, and they keep getting the nicotine and they break the smoking habit. Yeah. And by the way, I would argue that nicotine is probably the least, that's the least of the problems with smoking. The problem with smoking...
I have never found nicotine. I know it must be, and I've read articles about it, but when in the years where I was having to concentrate for extended periods of time, I would get nicotine
patches or
lozenges usually, and use them every so often to just get into like a really deep concentration mode. And there was definitely a period of time where I would use one maybe once a day or something like that. And then I was like, I wonder if I can just kick this cold turkey. And I went off of it and never thought about it.
Right.
So now that's one
We're not
person.
recommending that.
Anecdotal.
We're not recommending
I'm definitely not recommending it. Don't do.
But for
don't,
somebody that
don't go
smokes
do that.
and is covering their lungs in tar.
Yeah.
And also is addicted to nicotine. And what will tend to happen is the withdrawals and the chemical addiction is to nicotine, but the emotional psychological addiction is to the smoking. Kick the smoking, kick the tar habit, get the lungs cleaned up, and then wean yourself off of the nicotine. Makes more sense, right?
Yeah, and I do think breaking down those habits into their component parts is useful to think about. I mean, really, when you're smoking, you're actually addicted to MAOIs, and nicotine, and the experience. You know, we know that it has like this big multiplicative effect.
Sure.
But with anything, right? Like really, part of the thing you're trying to do is you cannot white knuckle forever.
Nope.
So I mean, like you're totally solid on that. Like that's not going to work, right? For me, like this type of habit, eating at night or whatever, it doesn't take that much effort. It's mostly a question of if I don't think about it and I just do the automatic animal thing that I want to do, I'm going to go eat something probably salty.
Right.
Unfortunately, I have this terrible thing. Maybe some of you that are listening have this too. That if I have something salty, I really want something sweet.
See, I want something fatty.
And then
I like tortilla chips and cheese. Oh yeah, then you want.
I get that.
Yeah.
Then I really want something salty.
Yeah. Right. Sure.
You know, and that's a damnable process because it just keeps going.
That's
right. Need something sweet to take out that salty, and it just keeps going. So, like, really, for me, and I've done this before. I've stopped eating at night many times, and after about a week, any cravings just go away. They don't come back.
Right.
And I'm fine. And I'm totally fine.
Same way with intermittent fasting in the morning.
Yeah, that's different than kicking a habit like smoking, but at the same time, many of the mechanisms are the same. If you can load up your process so that it has other consequences to you that are maybe more immediate. Like in the case of smoking, a lot of the effect is longer term, not shorter term. There may be something totally freaking miserable that you can think of to do to yourself if you know, or some great reward, you know, whichever way you choose to go with it. But there are many ways that I can think of to economically weight, you know, whatever it is you're trying to break, and it definitely takes some accountability, and accountability cannot be you to yourself.
Right.
No human can really do this. You need somebody, and then you need some way to add something to it, and I think that can be really, really effective. Betting isn't bad. I mean, like for a lot of people, even just the loss of you know, if you put a $10-15 bet on you're going to stop doing X, or you're going to, you know, break this habit, with a friend, it may feel worse to just tell them that you didn't, that you broke the habit,
Sure.
or they catch you breaking the habit, than the 10 or $15. But the fact that you put something on it at all makes you examine it. It's just part of our psychology.
Sure. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, for me, coming back to the food, so I'm in a spot right now where I'm eating really clean, and my alcohol consumption is really low, and I'm training consistently. And for me, the training drives the good choices with the things I put in my mouth. Now, for some people, I think it's the opposite. People who don't, and part of this is that I really enjoy training, but I also really enjoy good food. And so for me, when training is good, I start to think about food literally more as fuel. I start to think of myself like I'm an athlete, even though I'm really not anymore because I'm old. And I remember what it was like to be an athlete, right? Like, and you do too. Yeah. You were a pretty damn good athlete. And back when I was a professional strongman, that's kind of your whole life. And so I'll never be able to get back to that level. I'm not ever going to be a professional strongman again, but I remember what it was like to kind of have those things both in balance, and I remember what it was like to have those things out of balance at the other end of this pendulum swing, where everything you ate was only about fuel, and all you ever did was think about training, and it was kind of everything. And so for me, it becomes, this word is kind of a cheesy hippie word, but it's more about kind of harmony and balance in my life and make sure that those things line up. And so I enjoy training, and I enjoy making progress in training. And right now I'm training very consistently. I've changed my schedule around. So I'm training in the mornings. And in the past, I've kind of shunned training in the mornings because that's my good brain power time. But if I don't train in the mornings, something will happen in the business or life or something that will derail training in the afternoon. So I have to train in the mornings. And so what I do is I get up in the mornings now, very early, and I get the urgent stuff out of the way I don't tackle any like crazy stuff, and I don't tackle massive important stuff and CEO stuff. Like I do my online coaching and respond to a few emails, and then I make my pre-workout half the time it's a shake, half the time it's like eggs and some sort of mixture in eggs. And by 8:30 in the morning, I'm training. So I get my urgent stuff done pre-8:30, train at 8:30. I'm done training by 9:30, and then I can go back and sit down and do kind of CEO stuff. Well, what's weird is now that has become a scheduled habit, I really like it. I feel more balanced. And oh, by the way, now at 10:30 in the morning, 11:30 in the morning, 12:30 in the afternoon, I don't want a glass of whiskey because I'm like, it's going to hurt my gains. Maybe it won't.
Yeah.
But it feels that way to me. It feels like,
you got the endorphins.
That's right.
Here's the thing. Like, think of all the other benefits. Like, we know that your brain works far better after exercise than it does.
That's right.
Without it. And so you end up having, you have better attitude. You're in a better emotional place. So it's easier not to like go get that drink or whatever. So, I mean, so it's one of those wonderful examples that they talk about in the Power of Habit that they talk about. That's just a virtuous cycle. Yep. Getting out and working out at all typically creates a virtuous cycle for nutrition, emotional health, relationships. It's fascinating what all it does.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the best takeaways I think from this for people, and also something that I think is very motivating, are these habit-based books. My two favorites. So we both mentioned The Power of Habit, right, which was done by Charles Duhigg, I think is his last name.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The Power of Habit: Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. That's a great book to read. It's also a great Audible book. I've read it a couple times, and it's written in narrative format. It's easy to read, and so it's one of those books that those narrative format, easy to read books are also make really good Audible books. The other one that came out a couple years ago that I really like is called Atomic Habits, and that's by James Clear, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. And they really are super similar, but they're worth reading both. And I love it when you're trying to build a new habit or break a bad habit. These are great books to be reading in the process. Like if I were a smoker and we're trying to break the habit of smoking, I would be breaking the habit of smoking while reading these books or while listening to these books. Listen to them while you work out.
And reading or listening to them again, right?
Yeah, like, they're great.
Even if you've read them before, read them again. They're motivating.
That's exactly right. They're very motivating. So that's a great place to start. And then, again, we're always talking about sort of taking an honest, reflective look at what's going on in your life. Think about where those habits are. Those bad habits need to be broken. Don't be judgmental on yourself about little bitty things that don't really like it. You've got to be able to have enough self-actualization and self-honesty to go like, hey, it's actually okay to go get Andy's frozen custard every once in a while. There's like, don't punish yourself for that. But if you look at it and say, you know what, I'm a chronic smoker, I am a chronic overeater, I am a chronic overdrinker, I self-medicate with X, Y, and Z. I get angry and lash out at people that I actually shouldn't be angry about. I'm angry about other things. Like, there are so many of those things that we would all agree are like that's a bad habit that we need to work on. And figuring out a short-term way to be disciplined, and then allow, my experiences is that motivation and emotions and feelings follow action. So when you take action via disciplined steps for a short period of time, we're talking about 2-3 weeks, a month at the most, what you'll almost always find is that the feelings and the emotions and the motivation will follow soon, and it won't feel like discipline anymore. It'll feel like motivation. Yep. And then you'll be motivated to do the thing.
It's the truest thing ever. I mean, like, I've done this for so many years, and for me, I'm a little more like a robot, and I recognize this is a little easier for me to do. There are still plenty of times where things just don't feel good or fun, and I've noticed that if you implement the thing for a while, it changes. Emotionally, the rewards hit you afterwards, and then it doesn't take anything to like, you just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah.
And it's a huge deal.
Yeah, you know what's gross? Soda's gross now. So it's weird how like you can go back and think like, man, I used to be addicted to this thing. I drink a 2 liter of Pepsi every day, or 2 liter of Coke. I want about 2 gulps of soda per year. 1 gulp every 6 months. And my kids will order something, like we'll go to a restaurant or something. Maybe one of them orders a root beer or something. Like, you know what? Let me have a sip of that root beer. And I was sipping the root beer, and I'm like, it's good. Whew, that's sweet. Too sweet. Not interested.
We were on that road trip that our family took together to go to Telluride a few years ago, and I was driving from Springfield to Telluride with the kids, and it was like 3 or 4 day trip or whatever. And those long trips sort of are a trigger, which they talk about in Power of Habit. They're a trigger for me for soda, specifically Mountain Dew. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be kind of sleepy if I don't have some caffeine or whatever. I'm gonna grab a Mountain Dew. Got a Mountain Dew, and I'm not kidding. I drank 2 drinks of that thing. And I went at the next gas station, I threw it away. I was like, this is gross. This stuff is disgusting.
Yeah.
And it's not, if you drink it all the time, it's amazing. Sure. It's like hitting all your brain chemicals. But it is fascinating how you can see those things clearer once you get some distance from them.
That's right. Awesome, man. It's a good show. Thank you guys for listening to another Principles episode. Again, this is about how we build good habits and break bad habits. And we talk every Sunday, just principles that kind of led our life. Different personalities are on. It's usually Chris and I, but occasionally, as you've heard, we've had Nikki, Andrew, Scott. Our personalities in Barbell Logic and in the family are important. There are good things to learn from, and so this is just kind of a fun series we've been doing on Sundays. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, give us a 5-star review at iTunes or anywhere that you listen to the podcast. You can find us anywhere. Of course, you're listening right now, so you found us. But for your friends and family, you can share us on iTunes or Stitcher or Overcast or Spotify, who, again, we're still working on the $100 million deal like they did with Joe Rogan. But no news there currently. And so thanks for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.